you doing this afternoon? My name is Chris Rayborn. Welcome to our channel. We are Relocate with the Rayborns. We're with Coldwell Banker, Sunstar Realty. My wife and I are realtors with Coldwell Banker, Sunstar Realty, and we're, again, team Relocate with the Rayborns. So we wanted to kind of do a little bit of a podcast kind of explaining a little bit of the NRA settlement, because I know the media has kind of sensationalized the whole situation. People are scared coming into it. They really don't have a whole lot of idea what's going on. So one of the things we want to do is clarify the situation. So I've got a couple of professionals with me. I'm going to go and let them introduce themselves. So I'll start out with Connor.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Excited to be here. So I'm Connor Hancock with Community Lending based in Fort Myers. I do home loans. I do everything from conventional USDA, VA, FHA loans, and some non-QM. So kind of interested to sit here and talk to you guys about the settlement, how it affects not only your side of the business, but the lending side as well. So.
And Mr. Brent.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brent Canaveri. I manage two of our offices here with the Schmidt family of companies, Coldwell Banker, Sunstar Realty. I've got about 140 agents between two offices. So, obviously you've had a lot of experience explaining part of the settlement and how it was explained, and hopefully I can bring some value to this conversation. So,
excellent.
Absolutely. So I guess one of the big things we want to start off with, we're going to make this a very casual conversation. So one of the things, and I'll go ahead and open this up to you, Brent, first, is we want to kind of, if you could briefly give us an understanding of the NAR settlement from your point of view and from what you're seeing, because that way we can kind of clarify this a little bit.
And just to simplify it, there was a class action lawsuit that was brought against the National Association of Realtors, as well as some of your big brokerages. This lawsuit, I believe it was in the state of Missouri, it was a class action. Basically, the premise of the suit is that their argument was that they were requiring the seller, to pay buyer agent compensation. So typically when a property is listed for sale, there's a negotiated amount between the brokerage and the seller, and then quite often a portion of that would be shared with the buyer's agent. So there's a contract between the seller and the listing broker, and then a listing broker would pay, the seller would pay the listing broker, and a portion of that would be paid to the buyer's agent. The basis of the argument is that they said that they were colluding and were not allowing buyers to negotiate their own rate at the end of the day, and that as a result, they were forcing sellers to offer compensation to buyers' agents. I mean, that's the premise of the suit. And to be quite honest with you, even as part of this settlement, we're seeing that sellers are still agreeable to pay buyers' agents. So, there hasn't been a lot of change. But, significantly how it affects our industry is we have a system called MLS, everybody's heard of multiple listing service. And one of the things is the service is for agents to share information about a property, how much is being offered to the buyer's agent, if there is an amount being offered to the buyer's agents. Well, they've eliminated that as part of the settlement. When I say eliminate, they've eliminated any compensation that is being offered to any buyer agent at the end of the day. And as part of the settlement, nobody has admitted any wrongdoing with respect to the settlement. All commissions have always been negotiable at the end. So part of the argument is that, well, you guys have a standard rate. There is no standard rate. Everything is negotiable, has always been negotiable. But rather than litigating this, they felt it was in the best interest to settle this matter. And as a result of it, nobody's admitted necessarily any wrongdoing here. But in order to move forward in the industry, they've agreed to additional transparency, which I don't think is a bad thing. Because quite often buyers never really understood how the buyer's agent was being paid. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, because I think at the end of the day, when I used to sell back in the day, I would explain how the business worked, because ultimately, if the seller is paying the compensation on the transaction, where did the seller get their money from? They got it from the buyer. the buyer gave it to the seller, and then the seller gave it to me. So,
Yep.
Again, we're kind of in the same place, but we've changed the way that we've done business. And the other significant effect that it has had on our industry is, in order, as part of the settlement, okay, is they're requiring us to actually enter into agreements with buyers so that they clearly understand what is being charged. And again, that's negotiable, the amount that is being charged. Do you have a question, Chris?
Well, and that's the unique part of this whole situation, is that now we're actually having to go into, and a lot of states have already had that, and some will mention down the road, but it's now we're having to enter an agreement with that buyer. We're actually having to lock that buyer in, and as you said, memorialize that discussion so they know that
how people are being compensated, and it could be negotiated. And again, a buyer could have always negotiated it to begin with, even under the old rules.
But it wasn't discussed. We had a special, or not special, we had a very consistent way we were dealing with our buyers. And unfortunately, we didn't have those discussions because it wasn't necessary at that time, even though it was.
Correct.
But a lot of agents didn't feel like it was.
Didn't want to address it. Okay. I was always the agent that just threw it out there and explained it and said, somebody's paying at the end of the day, and you will be paying. Okay.
And that's it. I mean, we get our loans from Connor, or the buyers get their loans from Connor, and
he gets paid by doing the loan. So
then we're paying the seller, and the seller's just giving that money right back for our commission.
Yeah, and I guess I would say the biggest significant change that affects our industry is having the conversation. And like I said, I think being more transparent in this industry. I don't think there was anything wrong with the way it was conducted before, but I think it's a positive thing that we are being more transparent with how the business works with buyers. And that commission can always be negotiated.
Absolutely.
Okay, the compensation, whatever is agreed to, can be negotiated between a seller, the buyer, the agent. It's all negotiable.
Well,
and it always was.
Yeah, the funny part is, I think I sent it to you guys, or to you maybe, the other day, where I saw that one clip where it showed like 67% of home buyers think this is a good idea. They actually agree with it, which I was kind of surprised, because if you look at the media, they distort everything about what this agreement says and does.
They're trying to get a story out.
Yeah, exactly. So, you have a lot of people that say, well, they no longer have to pay commissions. I mean, commissions are done. Sellers don't have to pay. So I think buyers are really confused about it. So I think, if anything, this is going to help clarify things about, who gets paid, how they get paid, and who pays it.
Yeah, and I think personally, simply, this all could have been achieved with just a simple disclosure that explained how the business worked.
Well, the attorneys wouldn't make any money that way, though.
All right,
so that's the difference.
Yeah,
the one thing I kind of look at, just to kind of play the devil's advocate, and you guys may not like me saying this as realtor, so but from my view, I'm just trying to look at it. Okay, well, how would people perceive the industry if they're kind of stepping back from the outside and look at it? And that's the way I was trying to look at it. And the only thing that I saw fault with was maybe posting on the MLS like what the compensation is going to be, because that's almost like you're fixing the compensation and it's not negotiable. So I can see how that could be interpreted that way, but it doesn't really solve anything, because you can still post it elsewhere, just not on the MLS.
Yeah, and you have to be, I think with the new rules, we have to be very careful of how, even if we don't post it on the MLS, where we post it and how we post it.
Yeah, and what you say in that. So, you still have to let people know that it's still negotiable.
Yeah, that's the key.
And always has been. Yeah.
And that's the key to this whole conversation, is that everything is negotiable. Yeah. Your entire real estate agreement and offer and acceptance, everything's negotiable.
Yeah,
everything.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, commission's always been negotiable, but we just haven't really explained it as well as we have to now.
Yeah.
And I think if we did, we wouldn't be in this. Now, the thing to be careful about right now, yes, there's an agreed upon settlement, okay? Right. The court is yet to approve the settlement, okay? And I know the Department of Justice is looking into how this settlement was written.
Yeah, they're thinking it's not going far enough, aren't they?
Correct. The DOJ has made some commentary that, they're not sure they're in agreement with the settlement at the end of the day, because they do have some input on this. So we can certainly see it change again. I believe it's in November is when the court is supposed to either bless the settlement or say that there's going to be a change. But as part of the settlement, they agreed to implement it within X amount of months. So that's why we are doing this now. But stay tuned because this can all change again. So it is very possible it will change.
It's a fluid situation.
Correct. And I tell all my agents, okay, change is inevitable and it's going to happen again. So I'm sure there'll be additional changes.
So when we're talking about commission, right now we're talking about from the buyer side of things. As a seller, I mean, when you're talking about commissions, now with the way the settlement's written and the way people are explaining it, I think they're looking at having people say, well, you don't have to pay a commission from the seller side.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to the sellers when it comes to that?
Well, I think, first of all, obviously, for services that are rendered, the marketing of the property and selling the property, the listing office who's working with the seller to market the property and get it sold, they are going to be looking for a compensation on the transaction. Now, the seller has the option, okay? It does not prevent the seller from saying, hey, I'm willing to, pay some of the buyer's agent compensation. There's nothing in this settlement that says the seller cannot do that, okay?
Right.
And what we're finding right now is most sellers are like, okay, I'll offer some buyer agent compensation. I mean, we have some that say no, and we say, fine, okay, we'll offer nothing out. But here is the thing. If somebody's getting a loan, okay, and we have a loan person in here, okay? Now, if a buyer enters into a buyer broker type of an agreement, okay, they may have to count that as a debt when they're actually figuring their numbers out, okay? That, and again, I'm not the mortgage guy in the room, but that may be a consideration. So when a seller has the option to offer something, that would obviously offset any potential that the buyer may have. But we're seeing a lot of offers where if zero is being offered, the buyer is negotiating the fee that they need to pay to the buyer's agent. They're asking the seller to credit them in their offer towards paying the buyer's agent. So whether they're offering it up front or the buyer's coming back on the back end and saying, so essentially it gets rolled up into the price, okay, or rolled somewhere into the price.
Well, it would be closing costs is what it would be.
Well, a part of the closing cost, but let's be careful because, it's not being viewed as an IPC, which for those of you in YouTube world are...
Don't use acronyms.
Okay. Interested party contribution, okay, is what the concern was when they came out, because there's limits that, and again, I'm not speaking for the loan, but I will say something. There are limits on certain loans, how much a seller can credit the buyer.
Yep.
However, it's my understanding, okay, and I advise our agents to split it out separately, okay, if they are asking for money towards closing costs, towards the mortgage and the prepaids or whatever the case is, to state that separately. And then if they're asking for a credit towards their buyer broker agreement, put that as a separate line item in their offer.
Yeah, that's basically what we've had. So say, for example, that you guys agree to be paid, as a buyer's agent 3%, seller says I'm going to pay 1.5%. You put that in the agreement that's what it is. And so if you want your full 3%, the buyer is going to contribute that 1.5%. So that does not go against debt. That is actually considered a part of the closing cost. So we would have to get the buyer broker agreement from you guys, use that cost and add it to their closing costs. But the good thing is that does not go against the IPC, the interested party contribution.
Which is nice.
That was the fear. That was a big fear.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah. So now if you put that in the agreement, that's going to be basically the compensation 1.5% that goes in the closing costs. You still have not used up your IPC, so you can still do a credit to credit whatever they want. And it does vary from conventional, depending on the amount of money you put down. It's 3, 6, or 9% conventional, up to 6% on FHA and 4% on VA. So it's pretty high, especially on FHA.
Okay, so for clarity for everybody that's out there, and if you're considering getting a loan, and this is for clarity for me as well, okay, maybe I'll learn something new here today. For example, I'm working with a veteran, okay, the maximum contribution that a seller can make to credit towards the buyer's closing cost for his loan is 4% of whatever they're buying.
Correct.
And I'm going to give you an example right now, okay? And I'm putting you on the spot.
Sure.
Okay? we have a buyer broker agreement that veterans entered into, and I know the government has now changed some rules where the veterans can pay the fee, service fee, but the veteran does not have that additional 3% to pay the buyer's broker compensation.
Right.
As a result, an offer is written, and again, this is an example where the seller is offering no compensation to a buyer's agent.
Which is that's a concern. And that's
it's a concern.
Got going on now.
So an offer is presented, and the offer is presented as seller to credit the buyer 4% towards buyer's closing costs and prepaids. And then they put another section in there, seller to credit buyer 3% of sales price towards buyer's broker compensation at closing. Then that would be permissible in the transaction. So that does not exceed his 4% because we're not looking at it as an interested party contribution. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And for now, when they first came out, because it used to be where the buyer or the veteran cannot pay their buyer's agent fee. So
I know
they did away with that.
Was not
permitted. It was going to be temporary. So now supposedly it's permanent. We don't know if it's going to be permanent forever, but until they come up with some other solution. But you are correct. That would not go against that interested party contribution max of 4%.
Correct. So in essence, you could get 7% back from the seller on the transaction.
Which is nice. So essentially, we were trying to figure out what's going to happen in this settlement. And it's nice now because with that they changed the way that is, that the buyer can pay for their own buyer's agent fee. And none of this is considered an IPC. Every loan is the same. So there's really no difference between
the nice thing that
conventional and FHA.
The Veterans Administration saw this coming. I mean, not like it wasn't a wild haymaker. It was going to be thrown at everybody anyway. We all saw it
would be a disadvantage to veterans.
But absolutely. So the nice thing is VA took it on themselves and just kind of made that adjustment so they can be competitive in the market too. So again, for all you veterans, you guys can still get loans. Don't think that this settlement has changed anything you can do. The Veterans Administration was wise enough, which is not always a usual thing for them, to actually change that and make them more competitive in the field.
And just to put a little plug in for VA loans, I mean, the VA is actually very good when it comes to VA loans and providing guidelines and flexibility. I mean, they take the stance that, look, we want to do everything that we can to get the veteran into a home. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, those guys, they have a set of guidelines that they write. They're very stringent. They say if you do not meet these guidelines, then you're not going to get a house, no matter what. I can call the VA and say, look, we have a veteran that here's his situation. I can't get him to qualify right now. What do you recommend that we do? And they say, well, here's what you do to try and get an approval on this thing. And it's the same thing with appraisal now. They have many different ways, and I'm kind of getting off topic a little bit, but there are many different things that we can do to get an appraisal, get it up to the value that we need to through a reconsideration value. You don't have something like that on a conventional loan. So that's what I like about these guys, and that's what I like about when they did on this settlement. And they moved quickly.
Yeah, they did. I was surprised. The government does not move fast, so as we all know.
So
true story. It was very impressive at the speed that they moved and the way they jumped into this and were able to move the needle
and made the right decision.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah. So, in this industry at this point in time now, with this settlement, with this going on, we all agree nothing's really changed except for the fact that now we've got to discuss. Sorry, that was weird.
We got
to discuss. We actually have to discuss and open up about all of the facets of the offer in the process, and we're not really hiding anything. There's nothing that can be hidden anymore. Again, the big story is everything's negotiable. And now we're all open about it.
I personally think it's a good thing. I really do. I think getting past the media and kind of how they characterize it is tough. Because, when I think it's getting a little bit better now because I think people have a better understanding of kind of what it's trying to accomplish.
Yep.
But at first, you had people saying, you don't have to pay commission anymore. It's over. You don't have to pay 6%. That was the standard rate that everyone had to pay. So there was a lot of misinformation. But now I think it gets the buyer's agent and the buyer to talk about kind of what the process is, who's paying for what kind of value are you bringing to the table, how are you going to help them find a house. And you tell the seller, look, if you pay for part or all this commission for the buyer's agent, it's a huge advantage to you because that's going to open up so many more buyers to come into your house. It's going to raise the value of the property.
And I think that's one of the things, and to talk to Brent, one of the big things is to open that up to our agents and make sure they understand to explain what their value is. And this is really an ability for us to do a value-added proposition
Sure.
and let them know what we're going to do to earn that for them, to make sure that they understand it from the buyer side and the seller side. If we're going to ask the seller to offer a commission or compensation, we're going to have to explain to them why we're doing this.
And I think, there's a misunderstanding out there, even with respect to a buyer's agent, okay? They don't just open a door, okay? I mean,
Right.
Sometimes the sales cycle as a buyer's agent, it could take many months, okay? I used to work in a seasonal market. Sometimes it took me 3-4 years to sell a house to somebody because they come down during the season, they look, we go out, we try to find a property that may work for them. So, first of all, the sales cycle, there's quick ones. I do open a door and somebody loves it and falls in love, but there's a lot that goes into it in addition to what, and what did you bring and what are you going to do to get it to the closing table, okay? Right. Because there's inspections, there's title, there's deposits, there's negotiations. There's a lot that goes into a transaction, and you want to hire somebody who's knowledgeable and can navigate that for you, okay, Absolutely. And help you. So, I mean, and a lot of people don't understand, most agents in the business are independent contractors, okay? So they don't understand that they're not necessarily on the payroll, okay? If they don't get a sale, they don't get paid. Okay,
not on the payroll at all.
Correct. I'm saying for the most part. I mean, there's probably 10% of brokerages that have a different business model that have people on the payroll.
And the real estate agents that work for builders and things like that.
Correct. I mean, there's some variables in there, but for the most part, most of them are independent contractors, so they don't understand. They've got their own tax liability. They've got their own insurances to pay. They don't get paid by anybody. Okay, so and I think they've sensationalized this industry. On the $1 million listings, I made $800,000 on that sale, and you're like, okay, that's not the norm. Okay,
correct.
I think the average is like 30 grand.
I wish it was.
It's the same as lenders too. I mean, we have a ton of people that don't do any business at all.
Yeah, I think the national average is like 30 grand on average if you averaged out all the realtors in the U.S. Yeah. Okay, the average income's around 30,000. Yes, you have some people that make a substantial amount of money in the business and work very hard at it.
Correct.
Okay. But it's a lot of work and effort. This is a 7-day-a-week job too.
And that's probably why you had half the both realtors and lenders not renew their license over the last year.
Oh, correct.
It's tough.
I think that we're definitely going to. I think with this whole situation in the economy, I think we're going to definitely see a thinning of the herd on both the lending side and on the real estate side. And that's part of what we're talking about now with the value-added statement is to let people know what you do.
Correct.
And the real estate agents that are able to express this and able to get this across to their clients are going to survive better than the ones that are struggling trying to explain this.
It's going to be difficult, especially for newer agents entering into the business.
Mm-hmm.
Your agents that have been in it for a while. I mean, obviously they, have a better grasp and understanding. I mean, but it's not as simple as people think. Okay,
well, it's kind of similar to what our industry went through since 2008, 2009. Because back then, I mean, it was kind of like the Wild West. I mean, you could do whatever you wanted to. Yeah. So they had loan estimates, but you could change it. You could put what you wanted in there. And so there really wasn't an easy comparison versus other lenders. But now everything has changed since Dodd-Frank. So now loan estimate, we can't make changes on it. So it's pretty easy to take our loan estimate compared to the different lender. So it's very similar to what you guys are going through now. So we have to upfront explain the process to the client. And so what I do is I explain to them, here's what I do, here's the value I offer. When I do rates, I'll show them a range of rates from all the different investors we work with, and I'll explain to them, look, you can choose any rate that you want with various points. We can pay for some of these points for you, but it's up to you to tell me which one you want, which one do you think makes the most sense based on whether or not you're going to refi, when you think you can refi, and whether or not you think it's worth to pay up points to buy down the rate. And so it just, before, no one had to do that. They could just put the numbers out there and put out whatever they wanted. They would get the loan and they're done. But now it's, the people that can show value and really explain how the process works, those are the people that are going to get the business to be successful.
And I think that one of the things another thing we're trying to explain here is when you're working with an agent, I think interviewing the agent's the best, and I think that anybody who can, we've already kind of explained, and you've explained what the NAR settlement was, basics. We should be able to explain that to our clients.
Sure.
In that similar terms. And I think that that's one of the things that I love about Coldwell Banker is I think that we take a lot of time and we actually express that to our agents and make sure our agents understand
so
that.
they can educate the consumer because they need to know. And I was with a different franchise years ago when I was selling. Okay, and buyers would come in and they would ask me, how much do you charge? And a lot of agents would go, oh, no, you don't have to worry about that. It's all taken care of, blah, blah, blah. I believe in being totally transparent with people and explaining a process to them because I'm very analytical too, okay? And I want to know, at the end of the day, how you getting your money, okay? I mean, that's me, okay? Because it's coming from somewhere, okay? And as I mentioned in the beginning, hey, guys, let me explain to you how this business works. And you're going to pay one way or the other, okay? Because you're going to give it to them, and they're going to give it to me. So, I mean, you're going to pay, okay? Yeah.
So real quick, so we kind of take a little bit of the, I guess, some of the other mystery away. The agreement. Can you kind of explain the agreement and how it kind of sits as far as the way it is on paper?
Okay, you're talking with respect to a buyer-broker agreement.
Correct.
Okay,
I apologize, yes.
So where there will be a consultation. Now, ultimately, a result of this suit, it says basically you have to enter into an agreement. Okay, it doesn't say buyer-broker agreement, but you have to enter into an agreement, and then we could sit here and discuss, well, what is that agreement? Okay, the most common form. The Florida Association of Realtors prepared some forms. Okay, they belong to the National Association, and a lot of attorneys and agent input and all that. We have something called a buyer-broker agreement. So once you've found an agent that you're comfortable with and you think that you want to work with, okay, they will sit down and go over, what your requirements are, what you're looking for. I would hope that they would take the time to see how you may qualify and go through and explain to you what they're going to do with respect to their services. But the buyer-broker agreement essentially says, okay, at the end of the day, we will negotiate with the buyer-broker agreement that this is an agreement between our brokerage and the consumer saying that we're going to go out and look at property. We're going to specify what type of property that you're looking for in the area that you're looking in. And in the event you purchase a property, there's an agreed to compensation that you understand that will be owed to the brokerage at the end, whatever's negotiated, okay, in that agreement. Now, you're probably saying, well, I don't want to sign something where I have to pay money, okay? Sure. But it clearly states in the agreement that if the seller is offering any buyer agent compensation, you would be credited for it from what we agreed to in the compensation agreement.
Correct. So if the seller's offering, if we have a 3% agreement, the seller's offering 2.5, that 2.5 goes against that 3%.
You got it. So there would be a 0.5% left.
Correct.
Okay.
So would the buyer, I guess they would have to pay that the remaining amount based on the agreement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what if they did not, for example, they just said they didn't want to pay it, they already signed it? I mean, is that enforceable? Or
so as my illustrious leader has said to us in the past, it really, with that agreement, you can go down. Yeah. You can't go up.
Okay.
So if I want to eat that 0.5%, I can eat that 0.5% and do 2.5.
Okay.
It's not something we typically do, but it's available if we need to retain it.
I think that's a good point. You can go down, but you can't go up.
Yeah. But if we decide to go up, then there's another form that we have to fill. So if we go with some of the builders are offering 5%. Yeah. And we want to go up, we've got another addendum we've got to have signed in order to correct.
Correct. So it'd be a modification.
It's not a whole new buyer-broker agreement.
It's just an addendum.
Gotcha.
They call it a modification. So you're modifying the existing agreement.
Okay. So to be completely transparent, as we're trying to be today, there's also a part of the buyer's broker agreement that has a time to it.
Correct.
So you are locked into that buyer, that agent, until basically either the terms of that agreement runs out,
Mhm.
or until you both agree to walk away from it.
So I have a question about that. So
Sure.
what has the response been when you talk to a client trying to get them to sign that buyer broker agreement? I mean, is there a little bit of resistance on that? Because
I got to tell
they
you,
probably think it's some sort of like binding. I guess it is
So
kind of a
it
binding
is.
contract, but
I got to tell you, and my bride's behind the camera. We've not had.
Did you
we've
want to
not
come over here?
had-
No, I'm good on this side. I do want to interject in
Sure.
this last
Yeah,
thing.
go ahead.
But,
Oh.
Well, I was going to say part of that transparency, and like you said, part of if they can't come together with that extra half a point, or maybe it's a point, maybe it's 2 points.
Right.
Part of that is that that goes back then to the buyer,
Mhm.
and then they can decide: do I really want this house,
Yeah.
or maybe
Correct.
this isn't the property for me?
Or they can walk
Maybe
away.
I need to continue looking. So I feel like we're putting the power back to the buyer.
It's up to them to what they want to do.
We're giving them more informed,
Yeah.
and then they can make that decision from there.
Yep.
Anyway,
Okay.
sorry. That
No,
was
no, no,
that
that
was
makes
my
sense.
To answer your
objection.
question, to answer your question is, we've done several. We've not had any pushback at all.
Yeah.
But I think it's always the way that it's presented, not always the explanation, and you kind of take that fear bomb out of the whole thing, and really just kind of give them the meat and potatoes of it. And once they understand that, we haven't really changed the way we're doing business.
It's really the same that we do when I go over a loan estimate with a customer. So it totals the closing costs. And, most clients, when they hear closing costs, they think fees, commissions.
Absolutely.
And so I walk through everything with them. I go, look, there's processing fee, underwriting fee, but then there's title fees, which has nothing to do with us.
It's not even
title
yours.
companies.
Yeah.
We have county fees, doc fees. Those are county fees, nothing to do with us. You get your prepaid, your homeowner's insurance, 12 months worth.
Yeah.
That's your insurance. Those aren't fees. This is, something you're purchasing. Then you have your escrow accounts. So all that are closing costs.
Yep.
Once I walk through everything with people, and I go, look, the only thing that we charge is $1,590 for underwriting processing fee. That's it.
Yeah.
Everything else is credit report, title fees, government fees, your insurance, your taxes.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, I never understood that.
It's all
So
up and
once
open.
they understand it, it makes sense to them. And they have a much better time understanding what that number means as opposed to just think it's a fee that we're charging.
Yeah. So you were going to say,
I just wanted to build on it, and with Erica mentioning that. So
the voice from behind the camera.
The voice from behind the camera. Let's just go through an example, because we were talking about the buyer broker agreement, and again, we all commissions are negotiable, or compensation. Okay, but we will agree upon what my percentage or what my rate will be on this transaction. Sure. But let me just give an example. Let's say we have a buyer broker agreement, and it was taken at the negotiated 3% of the sales price that they were going to be compensated. And we find out that the seller is offering 2%. Okay, so we have a 1% shortfall with respect to the buyer broker agreement.
Yes, sir.
Now, we will know that when we write the offer. We know that right out of the gate.
Absolutely.
Okay, and as part of the paperwork process, we get something in writing from the other brokerage saying, or either signed off by the seller or the broker saying, we're going to pay you 2% on this transaction. So we know that we're going to get 2%, so that's an offset to the buyer. So I have 1% here that I have. It does not prevent the buyer from asking the seller to credit them an additional 1% towards their buyer broker agreement on their offer.
Correct.
Yeah.
So again, I like to look at this as kind of like, first of all, I like it because it's more transparent to how the transaction works, and buyers never really understood. I don't know why agents ran away from the question. Don't worry about it.
It was
I mean,
easier to hide behind the fact that don't worry about it. The seller's paying my commission.
Right.
Yeah, and again, if you really took the time, and I always did, to explain how the business works, I know. First of all, that created a lot of loyalty because they're like, he's up front. He explains how things are going to happen. Yeah. Okay, because I'm in sales. I want somebody to be loyal to me. I don't have an agreement that they're locked into. I think, you can always negotiate that additional 1%, even though the seller has already agreed to pay 2%. You can also put that in your offer saying, credit me an additional 1%. So that's always possible. So again, it's like moving money around. I like to explain it like, you got a couple walnut shells, put a marble under one, and we're moving it here and moving it there, and turn it over. It's going to show up somewhere. So the question is, where is it going to show up? Some buyers will be fine. I'll pay your fee. I mean, we have buyers like that as well. When I used to sell and for sale by owners, I mean, everybody can sell their own home. It's not a problem. I mean, there's nothing against that. I would have buyers that would ask me if I would show them the house, and I would say, well, you need to understand, quite often they don't want to pay any compensation.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy to contact them and see if they will. But, I've had buyers say to me, I'll just pay your commission, Brent. If I want the house and he doesn't want to pay it, I'll pay it. Okay. And I'm like, okay, not a problem. So, again, I think it's about when you're looking at an agent, the knowledge, how the business works, what type of housing, and understanding your requirements at the end and finding you what you actually need, okay, rather than driving around to a million different places and, I'm going to find you what you need.
Agreed. I mean, and I think the one thing this kind of does too, speaking of going to looking at a bunch of houses, this kind of does eliminate some of the looky-loos. It does kind of eliminate the people who just want to take a Sunday drive and have an agent show
up. Kind of like getting pre-approved for a loan.
Yeah. So I mean, you're having to enter this agreement before you even walk through the door.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't even show a house without this agreement.
Well, correct. I mean, as part of the rule, we have to have an agreement signed. There is some carve-outs on it. Commercial was carved out of this. The commercial market was carved out, and open houses as long as the conversation does not engage beyond just pointing out some features of a home. If it goes further than that, then there'll have to be a consultation, and a buyer-broker agreement would need to be entered into. So that's a little bit of a carve-out. So, hey, folks out there in the TV world or internet world, you can still go to open houses, okay? So nobody's gonna, but now there's a requirement for the agent to ask if they actually have a buyer-broker agreement with somebody, because I want buyers to be careful, okay? Because if you enter into a buyer's broker agreement and then you go out and buy another property, this basically says you could be on the hook for 2 sets of commission at the end of the day. So one of the requirements is the other agent is supposed to ask if they've entered into a buyer broker agreement, because if they had, they need to go talk to their buyer's agent that they hired. Okay, so essentially it's an employment contract for a specified period of time.
So this really locks that buyer in with that agent to an extent. So I mean, there's remedies to end that relationship if it needs to, but that locks that buyer and that buyer's agent in to that formal contract, and like the employment contract. Yeah. It's not a matter of where you could go and call each different listing agent, or just call one agent this weekend and another agent the next weekend.
Sure.
Really, the one thing I think that the consumer needs to understand is now you really do need to interview your real estate agent. You need to interview your sales.
Yeah, I think it's going to separate who's serious and who's not.
I agree.
It's kind of like when people come to us. I have people that will call me up and say, well, can you run numbers on this property? Yeah. I want to see what my payment's going to be, and I'll do a couple of those. But they keep doing property after property. And I said, well, look, for us to really understand, what you can afford, what you should be looking at, and how this is going to impact your finances, we really need to get you pre-approved. And for people that say, I don't want to do that now, then I say, well, I really can't help you at this point. Because it's kind of a waste of both our times.
Well, that's the thing. What's funny is you say that. We used to look at it, when we looked at our buyers, we would say, okay, we'll show you a couple. Basically, you'll see a couple. But after you see a couple, we need to know, are you pre-approved? Are you not pre-approved? Yeah. This is, I think, solidifying that relationship a whole lot further. And I think that it's one of those things that when you're looking at a house or you're looking to buy a house, there has to be a commitment there to that buyer's to the buyer's agent from the buyer. Yeah. And I think this not only just opens everything up, makes everything transparent, I think it solidifies those relationships.
And I think this should be, this was looked at pretty negatively in the beginning, but I really think it should be viewed as a positive. And like I told you earlier, I think it is. Yeah. I think a lot of people now are really understanding that they understand now that there is pricing flexibility, there's transparency, there's a better understanding of who pays for what, how much, and kind of what the process is. So I think it's a benefit to all sides, actually.
Agreed. Yeah. What's funny is if you're selling a property, you're going to interview a couple agents. You're going to look and see what they have to offer. You're going to see what they're willing to do for you. When you were a buyer, you just went with whoever. I knew Aunt Flo, she sells property or she buys property. Let's go with her.
Yeah.
It's going to force you into a situation where you actually have to interview those.
Yeah, and you're going to have to be comfortable with whoever you hire. So, one of the things that are changed and what we suggest is to have the consultation with the buyer up front, okay? Because quite often when I was an agent, I had a listing. Hey, I see you got it listed over here on Joe Schmo. Yeah, okay, what time you want to see it? I'll meet you over there at 2 o'clock,
exactly.
Okay? Open the door, and we're trying to create a relationship, okay? But I think this is...
15 properties later.
Correct,
Yeah.
and they can't buy anything, okay? But, I think it's important that we sit down and have that consultation and have an understanding and make sure that they're comfortable working with you at the end of the day. Because if they're going to commit, okay, then you need to be comfortable, or the buyer needs to be comfortable that they have somebody that they're confident in, he's got the competence, can do the job. Ask them, do they do this full time? I mean, these are a lot of the questions that buyers should be actually when they're interviewing a potential agent, on what the availability is going to be and how we're going to communicate, et cetera.
Which, again, I don't think that we were doing in the past. I don't think as a consumers weren't doing that. They were doing whoever had a license they went with because they knew they can unlock a door and write a contract or write an offer.
Correct.
I think that there is a definitely, again, we go back to that value added.
It's a way to show value is what it is, basically.
You need to interview your agent and understand what value they're bringing. And a good agent should be able to express that ability and what they're doing for that commission. I mean, it's funny because I tell Erica all the time when we go meet with somebody, we're going to express how we're going to make our money and what value we're going to bring to make that money. So, and like you said before, it's not just I unlock the door and write an offer. There's a whole lot more that goes to it.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's one of those things that we've got to be able to express to our clients, to our consumers. So
let me get back to, we got totally off track, and you asked me
when.
Okay. Yeah. You asked me how long these agreements go for.
Yes, sir.
Again, we talked about compensation being negotiable. Everything's negotiable, folks. Okay. And agents ask me the same question. They go, well, Brent, how long should I make this agreement good for?
Yeah.
And, the first question I ask is, well, are they buying a house soon? How quickly do they need a home? Because that's going to make the determination on how long we should make the agreement. I mean, if we are here and we're here to buy property right now, and we know that we want to secure a property, 90 days, because by the time we get to closing and everything else, find the property that they want. I mean, most of the time, 30 to 45 days we can close a property, but sometimes there's bumps in the road, whatever the case may be. So I would probably suggest maybe 2-3 months on the agreement. Okay, and like I said, I've had customers that I've worked with for 4 years before I sold them a house. So. But they came back every season because they were renting, and they would. But I would tell them, I'm still friends with them today.
Yeah,
so
one of the things that Eric and I do when we start looking at somebody, we interview and then we ask, how soon are you looking?
What's your time frame?
And typically we'll do 6 months. I think that's a comfortable amount of time.
Sure.
But again, like you said, everything's negotiable. I mean, if you're ready to buy now, you might not even need 6 months, a month, and you're good to go.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
But the one thing to understand is during that time period, whatever houses we show you during that time period, and even to an extent after that, if you do decide to step out of that agreement, you may still have to owe that agent money if you buy from another agent. So, there's stuff in that agreement that basically addresses that.
Yeah, and that's an important point. So let's just say we had an agreement and we showed whatever, 20, 30 properties, whatever the case is. And then, sometimes people want to cool off a little bit. Maybe it's just not working at this point, and our agreement subsequently expires. and they go out and purchase one of those homes that are still on the market right now. Currently, it's taking about 100 days to get a house under contract, 92 to 100, somewhere around there on average. And they go back out and purchase another property that I showed them during this agreement time period. They could be potentially on the hook for paying the compensation under the original agreement and paying compensation again. So just need to be careful about that. But if they enter into a new buyer broker agreement with another brokerage, okay, then cards are off the table. We're done. Okay, so it doesn't. Somebody's going to be compensated, and that very similar to a listing agreement. Okay.
Exactly.
Because we can list property and there are protection periods in that too. Most people are honest, but obviously we deal with the general public, and sometimes some people are not. Okay, but I would say 98% of people are. But you hear the stories of, when does your listing expire? I can give you a better deal after the agent's gone. There's protections built into that agreement, so that doesn't happen as well. So I mean, we work hard for our money, and we're only asking to be fairly compensated is all we're asking at the end of the day. So and again, I get back to that $1 million listing. I think that show at the end of the day, I mean, we see these guys, I made $500,000 on that one sale. I mean, that is not the norm, folks. Okay?
Not even close.
That is not the norm.
Close. I mean,
I think that's why the DOJ started looking at it, going, how much are these guys making?
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry.
So I think we've kind of beat this horse to death, I think, at this point in time. Is there anything else you want to add, or anything else that we missed, or you feel like we missed?
What I would say is stay tuned. This is a very fluid situation. I would ask that if you're interested in buying or selling, to please contact an agent that is knowledgeable with the market and can, navigate the process with you. And but I think that we will have additional changes as this rolls out, going towards the court settlement. I think we'll have new forms and everything else. I mean, every day is a new form and disclosures in the business. So, matter of fact, we just had a flood disclosure, a state requirement in the state of Florida, on any property. I don't care if it's in a flood zone or not. We have to have a flood disclosure if there's ever been a claim on it. So again, I hope this helped everybody, and I think it does add a lot of clarity to the business. And I think if we had the transparency to begin with up front, we wouldn't even be where we are right now. Okay.
And if we had every part of the contract, we wouldn't be writing a 15-page contract. I mean, there's always something new that's being added for you.
And the thing that really bothers me is, compensation commission has always been negotiable. Okay. Right. And we know that from an agency perspective, and this lawsuit said basically that we were charging a certain rate. We cannot do that. It's just antitrust violations, okay? Right. And, our MLS, yes, it would display a rate, but they weren't all the same, I'll tell you that.
That was just about the start of the lawsuit, that's all that was.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I mean, it's the way attorneys can make some money.
I think the counterpoint, that's what, that was the whole thing. I mean, you could have if you're showing a house that's at 3% and there's other ones that are 2 or even 1.5, I think that we're not supposed to, and
you think that would have influenced an agent on what one?
Or a little steering. Right. So now that it doesn't exist and it doesn't show up, that everything's fair.
Yeah, I think that's certainly for unfortunately we have some people that operate that way. I'll be quite honest with you. When I was an agent, I could care less if it was paying 1, 2, or whatever. I found you the house and moving on to the next one.
Exactly.
Let's look for the next sale. And you gotta, and look, that's what the customer wants. I'm going to get it for them.
Well, that's what you're in the business for. You're in business to help people buy homes.
Correct. So it's not just about the money. I mean, I want to help them get into what they want. So, I mean, of course, we all want money. But it is, why do you do this?
But it's not zero. It's not zero. So, I mean, there was always a compensation of some kind.
Correct. Correct. That takes something. So,
absolutely.
Something's better than nothing. So that's the way I used to look at it. So, actually, that's the way I always look at it.
True story. So, Connor, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, man. I've already said this, but given the fact that they kind of said that this is not going to be an interested party contribution, and veterans can pay their buyer's agent, there really is no difference between the different loan types. So it really has no effect. The only thing is, if the buyer does pay for part of their commission or the buyer's commission, that would have to be added to the loan estimate. That is really the only difference. So it's a very, very minor impact. So it really does not change the loan process at all.
Yeah, and I think that
and it's actually better for veterans too. It's actually better for.
And as I said, thank you to the VA. I think that the way they moved and how fast they moved on it was very impressive, and the fact that they kept the VA, they kept the veterans competitive in the market. Was amazing.
Huge plus.
Because that was one of the things that I know Brent and I had discussed a couple times was...
Yeah, they were sitting on it. What are veterans going to do? Because they're not allowed to pay the fees under a VA loan.
Yeah,
okay? And that's the modification that they made.
I think that how fast they moved on it really just helped our vets. And I got to tell you, I am a former Army medic, and I know you have kids
in
the Navy. And it was one of those things that it was a concern.
Yeah.
And I know we've got a lot of our agents.
So it's already hard enough for the VA because people think they're too hard, but they're not.
No, they're not. Yeah, I mean, VA loans, FHA loans, they're all relatively easy.
Yeah, they are.
It's just there's different outlines you got to follow.
Yeah.
So
awesome. So you should do a cast on the different types of loans, and because I think a lot of people are not educated about VA loans. Okay, they see 100% financing on an offer, and all of a sudden the seller goes,
"No skin in the game." I get it all the time.
I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
Okay,
well, that's again. It goes back
all the time.
It goes back to what we talked about earlier. A properly educated agent who takes that education and expresses what they can do. They'll explain that.
Yeah, and explain that it's a benefit to the veteran. I mean, they deserve something. They've given their time and service to the country. I mean, it's they should be able to take advantage of it.
So it's one of those things, and I agree. We should probably do a cast on that at some point in time. Sit down, just kind of get that whole thing together. Because honestly, that is an area where people have a lot of gray, and they don't understand a whole lot of it. Even agents,
no, they don't.
They don't understand.
Well, even a lot of lenders don't, and that could be part of the problem. So they have a different set of guidelines. And I don't want to get too deep into this, but the problem is if you have a lender that does not do many VA loans, that they don't understand the guidelines, and they are given a VA loan and they mess it up, the realtor thinks it's because VA loans are hard.
Yeah, it's not.
They don't think it's because the lender doesn't do them and he just doesn't understand them. So they're actually easier to get done, but they are a different set of guidelines, and you have to understand them.
And again, there's professionals that understand that specific a lot better than others.
Yeah,
and that happens in ours and
your
in
side
yours.
too.
Yeah,
so I agree. Excellent.
It's one of those things that I think we do need to do a cast on that later, and I would love to have you a part of it too, and just kind of have another discussion going into that.
Sure,
sounds good to me.
Yeah, because there's always discussion about types of loans and types of customers that we're dealing with.
I love talking about loans. You may not know that.
I'm aware. I'm aware. One person, I'm definitely aware of that. So I think we're going to go ahead and call this a wrap on this one. Hopefully,
good.
What we're talking about, just final statements, is that this settlement's not something that's going to take everybody out of the market like everybody, like the media wants to make you feel.
It's a good thing.
It's a great thing. I think it's one of those things that it opens everything up. It lets everybody see the transparency in our market and in our profession. And I think that it's one of those things that is going to help you in the long run as a buyer and as a seller. And I think that hopefully this discussion has helped you understand a little bit of it, or all of it, actually. And I think that in the long run, you're going to benefit from this. You may not see it up front, but you're going to benefit from this situation. So I want to thank Brent and Connor for being a part of this. Again, my name's Chris. We are with Coldwell Banker, Sunstar Realty, the Schmidt family of real estate. We are Chris and Erica of the Relocate with the Rayborn team. We're going to try and offer a lot more content. We're going to try and offer a lot more casts like this. We really enjoy this. This is what we do. We love buying and selling. We love helping people find their home and selling the home that they need to get out of to get to their next home. So we appreciate your time. Thank you. Until the next time, we'll see you then. Thank you.